Yeah. Okay, so we're starting right on the top of the Battle of Aleph, and we have to address an obvious question that our Gemara hasn't addressed. By the way, on the bottom of this Amud of Gemara, dots. So I don't know if we got to 2 dots yet. That's kind of the next. We did get to 2 dots. That's already going to be discussing other areas. Whatever. Let's go further. We'll see soon. We're going to learn something in the Gemara. Let's go from the beginning. So what's the question that we didn't discuss? We kept on saying that if a woman is in a room secluded with a man, were there witnesses? Were there not witnesses? Whatever there was. So there were witnesses, and the husband warned her, and there were witnesses. The bottom line is that the woman is now a suspected adulteress. And now we have to give her to drink the waters of the Saita. But we didn't answer a very obvious, simple question that we need to address. How long does this guy and this girl have to be together in the room in order to worry that there's an issue? How long do they need to be together in the room in order for it to be long enough to say that we suspect that maybe something happened? So if they're only there for 1 second, if they're there for 30 seconds, I mean, is there a small enough window that we can say that nothing happened? Obviously that nothing happened. So we only, again, because we don't have witnesses that something happened, we only have witnesses that they were together. But is there a frame, a time frame that they have to be together? So let's see inside the Gemara today. In fact, the Gemara, the Kama shiur stira. How long is the shear, is the time of stira, of their hiding, of their together in the room? What's that time frame? How much is that time? We have to answer that question. So the Gemara says three interesting answers, which the first part of the Gemara is going to discuss, and then it's going to discuss the next part of the answer. The first answer is Kidei Tuma, in order for her to become tummy, in order for it to become, violated or impure, in order for her to become impure. Okay. It's an interesting answer. It doesn't really answer the question fully, as we'll see in a moment what it means. So he says, so what is that? How long is that of her to become impure? Kidei bia, in order for bia, that's where the male organ enters the female organ, enters the female. For that actually to happen, kidei bia, that's the time of tuma. And the Gemara, the Gemara, the Bryce is not enough just with that, with taking that into account. This is no, and how do we explain that? Not enough. Not full penetration, even not enough time for there to be a full penetration there. The Gemara answers, enough time for the beginning of the male organ just to touch the beginning of the entering of the male organ into the female, just for them to begin to touch, not the full penetration, I guess, to go fully through with the act, but just the beginning of the act. Ha'ara'a is enough time for that to take place. That would be considered stira. That would be considered completing the act of hiding. Enough time for that, just that small act to take place. Is what we'll consider violation. I'm going to tell you the Gemara's answer. The Gemara is going to explain this already now, because you see the words, it's going to be easier. The Gemara is going to ask, in a minute, it's going to say, why do you need all these explanations? And by the way, there's going to be another explanation after. Let me read 3 more words. Kidei hakafas dekel. Well, how long is that for the male organ just to touch the female organ? Kidei hakafas dekel, enough same time it takes for a person to walk around a palm tree, that amount of time is the right amount of time in order for that short enough window for that to take place is enough time for the man and woman to be secluded in order to be considered her a site. So the Gemara is going to ask, I'm going to share with you now already what the Gemara is going to ask. He says, I don't get it. Why don't you just start off when I tell you how long is the window for the person to be violating stira, to be hidden together, just say surrounding a dekel tree, surrounding a walk around the palm tree. Why do you have to tell me all these things? How much is the time? In order for kidei tuma, for her to become tummy, to become impure. Then you say that's not enough. Then you tell me kidei bia, in order enough for there to be the interaction, the organ into the female organ. And then you tell me Kedei Ha'ara enough for the beginning of the male organ to go with female organ. Why can't you just tell me why don't you even skip and just say it's not the whole intimacy where full penetration, where full goes through, just start off, at least tell me the right schedule to begin with. And the Gemara is going to answer is that we want to avoid other questions. For example, if I tell you Kedei Tuma, if I just tell you the first part, that how much is the window of stira, how long do they have to be together, and I'll ask you in order for it to become tamei, you know what you'll think? You'll think it's enough time it's including the seduction that the man has to seduce the woman. That also takes time. So in other words, if it's enough time for the act of intimacy to take place between the man and the woman, what is included in that? It's enough time for it to become impure, for the act to take place. Well, I would think that the time required would be not just that the penetration should take place, but even enough for them to spend enough time that the act should happen following that, which is a much bigger window. So I tell you, so therefore the Gemara says, when I say Kedei Tuma, when enough for her to become impure, it doesn't include the whole window, because it could be he seduced her already the day before or some other time. We just need enough time. Kedei Bia, that's the answer, exactly the act, just the act of intimacy that takes place. And it's excluding the seduction time. Well, then I say, well, does that mean the entire intimacy to penetrate? In other words, when does a violation take place? And the answer is Kedei Ha'ara, enough of a window for the beginning, just for the male organ to touch the female, and that's enough for it to consider a violation. Because in Jewish law, when you want to know when there's the violations of certain men that are not allowed to be with certain women, the violation takes place even without the full penetration, just by the beginning of the penetration taking place. I think maybe the Gemara will discuss exactly what that means elsewhere, but just by the beginning of the penetration taking place, that's already considered a violation. And therefore, the time requirement, when we suspect a possibility that this guy's wife was together with another man in a room, okay, it doesn't require the seduction period, it doesn't even require the entire full penetration. If there's enough time in there that there'll be a little bit of a penetration, just a touching of the male organ to the female organ, that's enough time, then we consider her a soita and she has to drink the water. That's why it says Kedei Tuma, impurity, but only, not including the seduction period, only Kedei Bia, the actual intimacy taking place. And even with intimacy alone, Kedei Ha'ara, enough time for the male organ just to begin the penetration in the female, and then already that's considered a violation, and then she's going to be considered a saita. So the Gemara, now let's continue right along. So the Gemara says,
what is the last piece? What does that tell you? Kedei HaKafas.
Now there's going to be a 9. Now the question is, what is actually that amount of time? What is the amount of time? Fine. In other words, the first 3 examples were solidifying what are we worried about. It wasn't actually telling us the time. It was telling you the requirements of what we're worried about, not how long it takes, but what are we gauging? Not what is the time, but what are we gauging? So he clarified that we're not gauging the seduction period in this time period. All we're gauging is the actual beginning of the act of intimacy. So that's what we're trying to find. That's even what we're trying to find out, how long it takes. And now he's going to tell you how long it takes. And the Gemara is going to discuss this. We're just starting to discuss this. We'll discuss this later on. He's going to say that each of the Chachamim had a different time because they were gauging their own intimacy life, and they were trying to gauge how long does this process take place, and to arouse them, different modes of arousal, and they came up. There was 9 different times. There could be a possibility of 9 different times. And in halacha, they were trying to gauge and come up, and they had a debate. How long is that time period in order for it to take place? And therefore, the person should be chayiv. Each of the chachamim had a different time. Let's see what they are. So one says, one of the first of the 9 opinions, and remember the names because it's going to get complicated soon. If we get to it, there are contradictions between the rabbis. It seems to be a contradiction. So first opinion is kedei hakafas dekel. Enough time for one to walk around the palm tree. Now, Gemara is going to say that, well, how big is their palm tree, whatever. We'll see in a little bit a question that comes up. But right now, the amount of time it takes for one to walk around a palm tree is Divrei Rabbi Yishmael, is the opinion of the first rabbi. Great scholar Rabbi Yishmael says, very short window, however long it takes to walk around the palm tree, if the man and woman are together in the room, the guy's together with his wife that he warned them not to be with, that's enough time for it to be a site. Rabbi Elazar Aimer, he says, Rabbi Elazar says, Kidei mezigas hakos, enough time of pouring a cup. What kind of cup is it talking about? The olden days, they would, the wine didn't come like it is today. Came with whoever had people that make their own wine and so on. You'll know it's a very strong wine, and it takes a certain amount of time for the wine to be diluted. I'm thinking the soap. Sometimes you get soaps from those companies, and they make it originally for you to water down the original soap. It's not supposed to be so potent. So the amount of time that it takes in order to water down a cup of wine, of concentrated wine, is the amount of time that the magical number that he said is the amount of time it takes in order to the woman to be a saita. That's how long it's to be in the room. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua. So that's Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Yeshua Aimer, third opinion. He says, Kidei lishtoisa, the amount of time it takes to drink that cup. Now, right now, we think it means the amount of time. He's arguing with the earlier opinion. The earlier opinion was the amount of time it takes to dilute it. And now we think he's saying, no, not the amount of time it takes to dilute it, the amount of time it takes to drink it. And we'll see some of the Gemara, it's going to say that it means in addition to the person diluting the water, also drinking it. In other words, add on a little bit more time to your thing. But let's continue along and we'll see that soon. So far in the simple text, we have a few meanings. Let's go back. We have Rabbi Shmuel, who says going around the palm tree. Then we have Rabbi Elazar, who says diluting a cup of wine. And then we have Rabbi Yeshua, who says the amount of time to drink this cup of wine. Then we have a fourth opinion. We have Ben Azai. Ben Azai says, could they enough time to roast an egg? However much time you need to roast an egg, that is the amount of time that the woman's going to be a saita. That's a fourth opinion. Rabbi Kiva, who is the teacher of Ben Azai, Omer says, enough time to swallow the egg. Now, interesting. Remember, as I told you before, what was he saying? Was the first opinion saying diluting the water, and the second one saying no, drink it, or he meant diluting it and drinking it? You have the same question here. Does Ben Azai mean to roast an egg? And Rabbi Kiva saying no, not to roast an egg, to eat an egg, or is Rabbi Kiva adding on and saying to roast an egg and to eat it? Is he just adding on to the previous time? We'll see soon. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Omer, another opinion. What are we holding over here? We have so far surrounding a palm tree, diluting a cup of wine, drinking a cup of wine, roasting an egg, and eating and swallowing the egg. We have five opinions. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Omer, a sixth opinion. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says, not swallowing one egg, but swallowing three eggs. A bigger amount of time. 3 eggs, one after another. Rabbi Elazar ben Yirmiyah says, a seventh opinion, for a weaver, an expert weaver, to tie the ends of the string so that when they're having, let's say a string got snapped, and he's an expert, so he's very quick at reattaching the snapped strings. So in order to attach the strings to each other if they got snapped, he's an expert, so he does it very quick, and he says that amount of time that an expert weaver can reattach the strings, that is how long the time is for it to be a saita. Number 8, Rabbi Elazar ben Yirmiyah, Chanan ben Pinchas Omer, Chanan the son of Pinchas says, the amount of time it takes a woman, there's a woman specifically because she's quicker at it, into her mouth, and little kesem to pull out a splinter, or they used to maybe use splinters in order to maybe to clean their teeth or to poke, if they got something caught in their teeth. The amount it takes her to stick her hand into her mouth to pull out the piece of wood, the thorn, the piece of wood, that's the amount of time it takes for it to be a saita. And finally, the ninth opinion, Palemai, someone by the name of Palemai says, they should yadal hasal, in order for her to stick her hand into a basket, little kicker, to pull out a loaf of bread, that is the amount of time that she's going to be a saita. Now, they just finished with this ninth and final opinion. Even though there's no proof to this ninth opinion, it's interesting in the Torah, there is some kind of a mentioning, comparing a harlot to bread, because it says in Mishli, Kiva'ad Isha Zoina, that until, whatever that means, to a woman who's a harlot, ad, until Kikar Lechem, a loaf of bread. And we're going to discuss this verse, I believe, later on in the Gemara, but for right now, you see the Torah compares a loaf of bread to a harlot, and therefore there is some kind of mentioning of the ninth and final opinion of Palemoi, is that the amount of time that it takes is for a woman to stick her hand into a bread. That's the opinion he holds. So he goes with that opinion because he has some kind of source in Torah which kind of is close to that idea. So that's why, so that's the ninth and final opinion. Okay, so let's go over. So we have two sections to our Mishnah. The first section is telling us what are we trying to figure out the time to? And the answer is Kidei Tuma, in order for it to become impure, which is Kidei Bia, which is the amount of time of the actual intimacy, not the seduction time, and Kidei Ara, the amount of just the beginning of it. Then we have the 9 opinions surrounding a palm tree, diluting a cup of wine, drinking a cup of wine, roasting an egg, swallowing 3 eggs, tying a weaver tying the ends of the strings, a woman sticking her hand into her mouth to pull out a splinter, and enough time for a woman to stick her hand into a bread basket and to pull it out. That are the 2 sections to the Braisa or the Gemara here, whatever it is, and those are the opinions. The Gemara says, "V'chol hani lamali," questioning the first part of our Mishnah. Why do I need all these first 3 examples? The original question that I mentioned before. Why does it need to say enough time for it to become impure, defiled, which is enough time for intimacy and only the beginning of intimacy? The Gemara answers, we need all 3 of them, as I explained. The Tana Kedei Tuma, because if you would only said enough time for her to be violated, enough time for her to become impure, Havamina, I would have thought, if I just said enough time for her to become impure, Kedei Tuma Savaratsu, so how long does it take to impure? I mean, the whole process of making her, of having intimacy with her, the whole entire process. Kedei Tuma Sa, in order for it to become impure, Tame, Va'artsu Sa, and enough time to also seduct the seduction process, which is part of, of them being together. I would have thought that's what it meant, which is a much more extended time. I don't know how long you're going to consider for seduction. Kamash Malan, that's why it teaches us. Kidei Bia, that's why it gives you the second part to tell you that's not the process that we're trying to figure out the time to. We want to know Dei Bia, we want to know the time amount of the actual intimacy. Okay, so then why didn't you just say if you would have only told me intimacy, if you would have just said intimacy, Havemina, I would have thought Kidei Gemar Bia. I would have thought you need to go through with the whole process of the male organ in the female organ all the way through it, full penetration. Kamash Malan, so it's telling us Kidei Ara, only a little bit of penetration, only the beginning of it. That only if there is a little bit of it, it's the same violation as all other violations in the Torah, which men and women are not allowed to be together, that already happens as soon as there's just a touching of the male organ to the female organ. That's already considered a problem. So therefore, it needs to tell me all those first 3 cases that we're describing and defining the original prohibition that's taking place over here. That we don't mean seduction and we don't mean complete penetration, but even just part of it. Well, the Gemara says, and Iyash Me'inan had it just told me Kedei Ha'ara, why don't you just jump the gun? Just say enough time for him to begin penetration. Havemina Kedei Ha'ara V'Artzaso, then again, you would have skipped the steps. I would have said, okay, just enough to penetrate, but that's including the seduction process. So Kamash Malan, that's why it says, listen, let me start at the beginning. Kedei Tuma, enough time for him to make her defile her. Now, and then it says, well, and let me add then 2 clauses to limit the this long time period that you think, let you know it's not really so long. It's only the intimacy, not the seduction process. That's why it's adding another clause to it, another limiting that it's not so much, it's much less. And then again, adding another part to it and limiting it and saying even more that it's not even the whole intimacy, it's just not a whole penetration, just a partial penetration, and that you're already chayv. And that's why we need the first section of the Mishnah before we get into the 9 opinions, debating and arguing what exactly is the amount of time, first to analyze and clarify that what is the process of what we're analyzing. So the Gemara goes right along. The Gemara says, well,
Can I ask a question later? Or you want to stay for land?
One second. And then he asks just, and then he wants to know, well, what's the actual time? So then the Mishnah says, well, what is the amount of time of the beginning of penetration? And then he goes into share with you the 9 opinions. In order for one to surround a palm tree. And that is the end of this first section of the Mishnah. Yeah, you could ask a question. Maybe I'll just stop it over here. We'll leave it over here. We'll do short.
No, we can keep going. I was unclear on one